And then there's the whole financial engineering investment going on. NVIDIA gives 100 million to OpenAI. OpenAI then says, okay, we'll work with Oracle, we'll use Oracle's data center. Then Oracle is part of Stargate, which is 500 billion. It's like 100 billion is pocket change these days. So, yeah. It's like there's a recursive loop going around, uh, you know, uh, and so data.
Virtual motion machine.
Welcome to episode 27 of It's About Data. This time we're joined by industry analyst Sanjeev Mohan to talk about acquisitions, rumors of acquisitions, and the Perpetual AI capital machine.
There's some intrigue this week, and there was also an announcement this week. But the intrigue, obviously, I think what everybody's talking about is at the beginning of the week, the information had gotten a scoop that DBT was in, or I should say that Fivetran was in talks to buy DBT. Of course, that also follows Fivetran's acquisition of a similar company, Tobika, I believe is what I keep forgetting the name, but they're the SQL Mesh, folks. So there's a lot of intrigue there, and of course, Databricks also just made an acquisition announcement. But Sanjay, let's dive in here and talk a little bit about, at least right now, the rumors behind the news, which is basically Fivetran and DBT. Kind of what's your take on it?
So, Tony, Matt, what we are seeing in 2025 is a continuation of something that we've been talking about for years, but finally we are seeing this consolidation happening a lot, like Salesforce buying Informatica. Now, whether Fivetran buys or does not buy DBT, because it's a rumor, so there is no confirmation, but it shows one thing very clearly: DBT is in trouble. And so the question is, if Fivetran doesn't buy DBT, then who buys DBT? So, interestingly, like you said, Tony, they just bought Tubico, which is a DBT compatible data transformation engine. So why buy a competition? A lot of speculation. So I don't want to sort of add to the murky waters here, but who knows? I mean, DBT is open source. So maybe what they'll do is they will take the DBT's features. Tubico has really good orchestration, and they will merge some of the data transformation into Tubico SQL Mesh, and have a commercial version.
Right. Let's just take that up a notch, which is that, in terms of the open source part, essentially, DBT has been going through, I think, a trajectory. It's kind of, in a way, almost similar to Elastic, which is that, yes, there is DBT core that is open source. So there's a little bit of a differentiation there. But they had made an application, I think it was like SKF or SDF. SDF. And that was not the open source. It also basically was a much better execution layer. And so the idea is that if you're going to be, the path forward with DBT was going to be with this new execution layer, basically Rust instead of C++ based, and that in turn, I think, basically implied to the large mass of DBT, the fan base, which is loves using the open source. That, like, well, is there a future there?
So
interesting.
Yeah. So Tony is interesting because SDF gave them a really fast execution engine. But before that, they made another acquisition. I think the company was called Transform.
Yes.
They got the semantic layer.
Yes.
Semantic layer today is one of the hottest topics. You and I talked to DBT a couple of months ago. What did they tell us? They told us that with its semantic layer, we can now be the BI tool, we can be an ETL tool, we can be a data catalog tool, we can be the training grounds for AI models, we can be the inference layer. Basically, this semantic layer is the big unlock. And I don't think it panned out the way DBT was expecting. And now we have a new concept which got introduced literally a week, 10 days ago, called Open Semantic Interchange, OSI.
Right.
And
Yes.
so it's not even like whether DBT's approach became the right approach. I think now there's a new approach which is being led by Snowflake, Salesforce, DBT is part of that, Datadog, and a whole bunch of other companies.
Right.
So I think I laud DBT for their vision and the amount of what they try to do, but I think they've run into this is my interpretation. One is with semantic layer. The second one is with this whole open source DBT core versus DBT Fusion, which was a commercial version, and and a lot of vendors are not really interested in. It's the same story happened, if you remember, between Hortonworks when it got bought by Cloudera. The
Hmm.
users of Hortonworks were like, why would we pay for Hadoop? So same thing. I think the history is repeating itself, but between DBT Core and DBT Fusion.
Hitting
So
the wall.
And I think there are a couple of ways you can interpret this acquisition. One is you're trying to keep something out of your competitor's hands, right? We saw this. I think Tabular is a perfect example. That
yeah,
acquisition, there was
Yeah.
clearly an intention to keep it from falling into Snowflake's hands. And second is just purely the mindshare play. Even if you have a competing product, you want to bring all that mindshare on board. And then the question is, how do you handle it once you have it? Do you like try to get them onto other products, or do you continue investing in the DBT product?
very interesting observation. I didn't think about it because just the way Databricks opens both the table formats,
Yes.
Iceberg and Delta. Now, Fivetran, if this acquisition goes through, still a rumor, they will own both the major data transformation engines, DBT and SQL Mesh.
Right, but there's another piece here that's which is that with SQL Mesh or Tobico, they basically have a piece that DBT lacked, which was the orchestration.
Yes.
So, and the thing is that I could also see, coming from this, given that there seems to be sort of a parting of the ways from DBT core and basically and basically the DPC. I'll just call it professional at this point. That I could see that DBT core and SQL Mesh could basically be converged into one engine. I mean, I don't know about the technical, technology barriers there, but in terms of the user base, my sense is since the DBT user base already was pretty well, it's been fragmenting between the open source folks and the pro folks. I'm sort of wondering again, like what you're saying, Sanjeev, this might be a flight to safety.
Yes. And the funny thing that crossed my mind was DBT took off so fast.
Yes.
Even when Informatica was incumbent, not just Informatica, Talent, Matillion, they've all doing data transformation. But DBT was this fresh way of looking at data transformation,
Hmm.
place and CI/CD, versioning, all the things that Informatica missed.
Yes.
And Informatica did all the heavy lifting, but they missed his user experience pieces that DBT brought in. So, Tony, what you're saying is that SQL Mesh added orchestration to a layer that had already added orchestration to what Informatica was missing. So
Right.
this journey never ends. It's like, uh,
Well, I
so
think also, if I'm not mistaken, Fivetran was offering DBT open source through their platform.
Yeah.
yes,
And if that remained popular, then this acquisition may just be about shoring up the back end to make it more scalable.
yeah,
And they just assume, okay, users, it's point and click, you jump in, you can start writing your Python code or whatever. That might be a very attractive option.
correct.
Yeah. There's also, I mean, and hopefully they avoid the fate, basically of InfluxDB, which never found a new version that no matter how much they were certainly very happy to cannibalize whatever they've done, and and I'm just amazed that on the open source side, which basically that there remains such a strong following that AWS basically came in on a partnership on it, but otherwise InfluxDB is a great example of a company that just eats its own. And I'm sort of wondering if DBT was going down that same path. And with Fivetran coming in and having also a reach into the DBT open source folks, that this might become an end around to kind of resecure that flank.
Correct. Yeah. Actually, InfluxDB also reminded me, it's in time series space. And Tony, you and I met with the founder of Timescale, which is now called Tiger Data.
Hmm. Hmm.
Same thing. They rebranded themselves to Tiger Data, and they said, no, no, don't think of us as time series database. We are the general purpose Postgres.
Yes. Yes, everybody
Interesting.
wants to be all things to all people. As I said, I was telling you a story. I won't give the name of the vendor, but that I had right before our recording today, which is a vendor which does workflow automation. And they thought, okay, they started data pipelines, but we can also do this with infrastructure. We can also do this with that. And I'm saying, like, you're a small company, you're a startup. Focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah,
get carried away.
exactly. It's like everyone wants to be a platform before they're ready.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. So let's kind of kind of pivot over to probably a less dramatic, but it's an actual announcement, which
Hmm.
is Databricks buying Mooncake, and
Yeah.
along with also separate announcement at the same time, which adding access to OpenAI's GPT.
Yes.
What's your take on this?
So the second announcement, let's get that out of the way. If we want to stick to data, the
Yeah.
what's happening in AI is just mind-boggling. Microsoft and OpenAI are very close, but now GitHub Copilot has support for Anthropic, and then OpenAI models are also available outside now in AWS and
Hmm.
OCI, maybe, yeah. So, and then there's the whole financial engineering investment going on. NVIDIA gives 100 million
Oh gosh,
to
yes.
OpenAI. OpenAI then says, okay, we'll work with Oracle, we'll use Oracle's data center, then Oracle's part of Stargate, which is 500 billion. It's like 100 billion is pocket change these days. So,
It's wild. It's
yeah.
wild. And it feels
And
like a
it's
shell
like
game
there's a
too.
there's a recursive loop going around,
Yes.
uh, and so data,
Virtual motion machine.
yeah. So Databricks offering OpenAI models, to me, it's like expected.
Yeah.
It's you know,
Yeah, I mean, it's just a wild, wild situation, and I keep thinking that we'll get some rationalization at some point, but it feels like we're just trying to put together these deals to keep things moving, to keep the cash flowing in a circle, like you said, Tony.
Well, put it this way, I mean, there's such huge magnitudes of cash that are required for this. And at the moment, Nvidia is the rich guy on the block, and they realize they need to do something to keep this, to keep this machine going. The fact is, OpenAI is basically a bottomless sieve for capital investment at this point.
yeah,
Um, Oracle also has some very major expansion plans, and they're coming off of a much smaller revenue base compared to the hyperscalers. And then you have, of course, all this, Nvidia, and there's probably some political ramifications on this as well, coming to the rescue of Intel. So it seems like Nvidia is, I think everybody's looking at Nvidia's like help to keep finance this generative AI revolution going, because the rest of us are starting to run out of money.
yeah.
What do you think about Oracle's bond issue, Tony and Sanjeev?
Oracle has such high valuations now, and now they're,
Yeah.
Larry Ellison's son, David Ellison, is now trying to buy out Hollywood. They're trying to
Right.
buy out TikTok. Who knows? Maybe they'll try to buy Snowflake. I'm speculations below on this podcast, because their valuation so high they don't even have to pay cash. They have to just literally just throw stocks
Yeah,
around.
but valuation, and I guess NVIDIA is a good example of that. But the thing is that with NVIDIA, the difference is that they don't own the fabs. So they actually have very little at risk.
Mhm.
Whereas, whereas Oracle, has to build, the infrastructure for us. Now, admittedly, Oracle has some fairly, savvy strategies here, which is that they're not buying data center space; they are renting,
Mm.
and essentially they're basically only building out OCI capacity if they have actually firm orders. But when you have basically OpenAI coming in with a $300 billion order there, that tends to kind of skew things quite a bit. And the fact is that um, yes, OCI is having its moment in the sun right now, and actually that's actually more than just a play on words. I'll get into that in a second. But the thing is that, and it's based on some very uniquely differentiated technology. I mean, Larry was very smart in saying in ripping up Gen 1 of OCI because he realized that was just a me too, and it was just never going to
Yeah.
compete against the big three. And so he decided, let's take a leapfrog step here. And since we've also hired people who've learned, he hired a bunch of folks. He has a cloud unit up in Seattle. They hired a bunch of folks from Amazon, from Amazon and from Azure, and got some of the best minds there. And they said, hey, let's have a blank sheet of paper, start from scratch. How would you do it now? And that's been kind of the key. That's why, for instance, in OCI, you can have you can scale, NVIDIA super, in what OCI calls super clusters, much larger than any of the hyperscalers can. It's because of OCI's unique architecture. The sun part of this is I wrote a piece in SiliconANGLE a few weeks back, when all this was coming out, and say, look, something, there's a backstory here that nobody's catching, which is that Oracle becoming an infrastructure company. Well, when did it start? When they made the Sun acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
And that Sun acquisition, for even years afterwards, was considered to be one of the worst acquisitions in IT history. But what it gave Oracle was systems expertise. It gave them that systems mentality, which initially was basically surfaced through Exadata. But then when it came time, they weren't relying on Sun engineers to build out OCI, but it gave them basically the mindset that when they decided to finally go to cloud many years later, get a later start, they had that systems mindset in there, and they hired people and enabled them to get going.
Yeah, and we'll see what the impact is for the broader build out of all this AI infrastructure. I mean, as we've suggested, it seems very tenuous given the amounts of money required to keep it moving.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah.
Oracle's valuation is so high based on one client, OpenAI. And all of this that's going on is based on dreams and promises, and it's keeping American GDP at and S&P at the record high levels. So
and there's a lot of shuffling on paper. Don't get me wrong, NVIDIA has amazing cash flow, but they're also doing investments by giving you GPUs, which shows up as profit. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on.
Well,
just yesterday, OpenAI gave a ton of money, $14 billion to CoreWeave, for CoreWeave to rent out NVIDIA chips. I think end of the day, the money is being made by NVIDIA making the chips. Maybe the construction companies building out data centers, and the energy companies building out power plants.
But then the question is, if they can build them, and then where do we end up if this starts to slow down, right? The Economist had an article recently, again, comparing this to the build out of optical networks in the late 90s, early 2000s, which we talked about before on the show, and saying, in the long term, this is a questionable investment. This is a lot of infrastructure.
Actually, no,
we can't actually keep that in use in the future.
Actually, to clarify that, Matt, in the very long term, it's a great investment. In the short term, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
Because eventually, today those optical networks are being used, but it took a generation of bankruptcies. No, we're not going to say that these companies are going to go bankrupt.
I agree.
Or anything like that. So we're not really. I don't think this is going to unfold in exactly the same way, but there are some parallels in terms of that we're building out this future-proofed infrastructure for a future which may take a little bit longer to come.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and just building out so much power infrastructure, where does that leave us if electricity demand drops in, say, 5 years?
I read in the state of Virginia, normal citizens, the electricity bills have gone up.
Oh gosh, yes.
To pay for all the hyperscalers data centers that are consuming electricity.
I think it was Bloomberg or The Economist. I think it was Bloomberg did a piece, I think just this week, that showed across the country where the electricity rates have gone up, and it's like 3/4 of the country, especially closer to the coasts, is where the rates have gone up because that's where the data centers are. And whereas in the middle of the country where you have a surplus of powers, not quite so bad. But of course, at the other hand, we still have to build. This is basically gets to become a national infrastructure issue. we need to build out essentially, the infrastructure to transport that power. And as a country, we've not really, we've not really met that at this point.
That's
Still
very
piecemeal.
interesting. I think there's also this whole question about where the power plants are being built, and whether they're atomic or not. Because Saudi Arabia and all these countries have land, they have solar, they have oil,
Yes.
so they want to build out data centers. I've heard China is building out
Hmm.
uh, atomic power plants all over the place. But then to your point, Tony, how this electricity going to, what's the grid system in
The
place?
grid.
So,
Exactly.
Yeah. And this has been a green energy issue for years, where, for example, you've got all this green power in Texas, but it can't get out of Texas if they have a
correct.
surplus, right? Like it's
Yeah.
very hard to get it out.
And when Texas had that breakdown that one winter about 3 years ago, they couldn't
Yeah.
import electricity from any other state
No,
because
no,
they
no.
have these
Yeah.
blockers. It's
They were they
yeah.
were separated. Anyway, let's just move on at the end, to Databricks. This is actually a deal that is on the table today
Yes,
with Mooncake.
mooncake.
Uh,
And it's another
and
Postgres company.
Yeah.
it's an acquihire, though. I think there are only like about a half dozen people there, as I
Yeah,
understand.
it's so very few people actually had ever heard of Mooncake because
Yeah.
it's still a seed funded company. But what's happening? The whole play is called Lake Base. Lake Base is OLTP combined with a lake house.
Hmm.
So that's a whole idea. It's a database, transaction database as a base, and then the lakehouse. What I understand from Mooncake, because Mooncake was not on my radar, to be honest, till the acquisition took place. So, and Matt, you wrote the definitive book on data engineering and how we go from OLTP to OLAP, and we do change data capture, and we do all these pipelines. All that is, according to Lakebase, is going away. What Lakebase is saying is that you have your transaction database in Postgres, and then you find a way to synchronize new
Yeah.
data into either Iceberg or Delta, and you expose the metadata through Unity catalog. And
Yeah.
that is the problem that Mooncake is trying to solve.
Yeah, and I gave a talk on this actually a couple of years ago at Data Council, and basically what I said is that this was the direction we were moving in.
Oh,
And
wow.
architecturally, it's actually not different from what we've had before. The difference is that to do this in the past, you had to have a huge engineering team, right? Like you had
Yes.
to set up your transactional system, and then CDC, and then Kafka, and then your Lakehouse and all this stuff. And now that's being automated so that anyone can just turn it on turnkey, and that's the benefit of the cloud, right? Now the
Yeah.
question is, what does the cost structure look like when
Yeah.
you do that? But I haven't dug into the details of their architecture, but every one of these architectures I've looked at, that's how it works. Like you're really combining multiple systems, but then for the user, it's fairly seamless, and you have different interfaces to analytics queries versus transactional.
So, and where the reason why this change is coming is what you just said. When you gave a talk at Data Council a few years ago, and you talk about users right now, who are your users? These are human beings, business analysts, data engineers, data scientists. But who are the users today? It's not people, it's agents. And all
Oh,
of
yeah,
this is
yeah.
happening because of
Hmm.
Neon is saying that 80% of their databases are instantiated and then shut down by agents. Agents,
Hmm.
for in a multi-agent system, the first agent needs access to data super fast, because then there's a whole orchestration of other agents that are happening downstream. So how do you have this agent find the latest data, in whatever format it is, whether it's OLTP, it's Iceberg, Delta, and so that piece is being enabled by Mooncake.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I think it still raises lots of questions, right? Like one of the questions that came up on a recent call that Tony and I had was like, how do you manage the resources that these agents are going to consume, especially as we go to pay-as-you-go databases? And so, you're paying per query in like a BigQuery or an Athena, and you just bombard these databases. And is it the same, sort of profligate cost structure that we have more broadly in the AI world, or is this going to become more manageable as we go forward?
Yeah.
Well, I think I would put it this way, sort of like on a parallel track. I was reading a piece about Netflix, which basically was very heavily into microservices, but what the article made the case for is that for certain basically repetitive functions, that a monolithic architecture, which was always connected, always on, was more economical. So I have a feeling we're probably going to be seeing, I mean, this is down the road. We're only just starting to dip our toes in the water with agents. But as we start having, starting to get experience with these transient agentic databases, at some point, I think we're going to end up finding some sort of happy medium here, but it's going to take a while, and it's going to take a lot of some fairly steep compute bills on the part of customers to force to providers like Databricks and Snowflake, because Snowflake also with crispy data, probably the same idea. They come up with a basically sort of
just in case people
crunchy. I always keep confusing that. Maybe it's just as well. Snowflake.
It sounds delicious either way. So.
Either way, it sounds good. I think if we don't watch out, basically, if I don't get the name right, I'll be toast. But but anyway, but at some point, though, I mean, it's going to be through the school of hard knocks where we figure out, like, how do we make this all manageable and cost effective?
Yeah, and I think I think all of us are convinced that the dust has not settled on the current cycle, right? It's not like it can go up and up and up forever.
Right.
There have to be some corrections before we get into more of a steady state.